Welcome everyone to our first roundtable discussion of the day, which is a roundtable discussion of the top 5 companies in diversity, large enterprises, and top 5 diversity champions of large enterprises. It's a real pleasure to have all of you join us today because in this room are those companies and those champions who are really pushing forward what D&I should be in corporate India. These are companies that have executed outstanding policies, programs, and initiatives to drive not just higher participation of women in the workplace, but also higher performance of women. So let me do a quick round of introduction of our speakers, and then of course we will hear from them as well. Joining us at the table is Ruhi Ranjan, who is the lead Europe markets of Accenture Advanced Technology Centers India and Inclusion and Diversity lead for Accenture Solutions Private Limited. Welcome, Ruhi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and hello, everyone.
We also have Avril Miranda Fernandes, who's the Executive Director HR of Morgan Stanley. Welcome, Avril.
Thank you, Neha, for having us on. It's a pleasure.
We have with us today also Gopinath Pullaihgari, who is the Director and Head of Human Resources, Verizon India. Welcome, Gopinath.
Hey, hi, good morning and welcome all.
And there's Mitali Monalisa, who's the Director, Analytics and DevOps, Client Computing Group of Intel India, Intel Technology India Private Limited. Welcome, Mitali.
Thank you, Neha, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Mitali, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, lovely. And I can hear you too. Welcome. On the table, we also have Priti Singh, who's the Senior Vice President of HR South Asia at Mastercard Incorporated. Welcome, Priti.
Thank you, Neha, for inviting me, and good morning, everyone.
And we have Subhashri Pradeep, who's the Head DE&I of Sodexo India Services Private Limited. Welcome, Subhashri.
Thank you so much, Neha. It's great to be here. Good morning, all of you.
And last but not the least is Tina Vinod, the Global Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Thoughtworks Technologies India Private Limited. Welcome, Tina.
Thanks, Neha. It's wonderful to be here and looking forward to a very insightful discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Aisha, can you please stop sharing screen? Lovely. Good. Now we can see all your faces very, very clearly. And the whole format of today's roundtable discussion is just that. We wanted to be a discussion amongst all of you champions to really talk about what it will take to increase women performance as well as participation in the Indian workplace. So to get started, it would be lovely to just hear from you in a couple of lines about why your company cares so much about building diversity. And I'm going to go alphabetically as I see it on my screen. So when I call out your name, if you can please unmute yourself and speak. Avril, could you go first, please?
Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to go first because you get to say all the cool things. But it's also scary to go first because, you have to bear the burden of answering the question well. Thank you, Neha, for the question. Why does Morgan Stanley care about diversity and inclusion? I mean, it is hard to succeed in today's world if your organization is not socially responsible, one, or does not reflect the environment in which it operates. So that's number one. By nature, we are a diverse world, and so we care about diversity in all its shapes and forms. For us, it's about making sure that the society is represented within our organization. Are we there yet? No, and we are well aware of it. But we have made progress, and hopefully I will get a chance to speak about it through the course of today's questions. So I think, so that's the very basic fundamental reasons, right? I think we need to be representative of the societies in which we work, and we need to be responsible. And we walk the talk. It is one of our 5 core values based on which we do business. Commit to diversity and inclusion is one of our 5 core values globally. It's important in the way we service our clients. It's important in the way we contribute to society, and it's important in it's just business sense. If you want the best out of people, they need to feel a sense of inclusion. Our CEO loves to use the word belonging. So it's beyond inclusion. It's about people feeling that it's their room and they belong there. Diversity is an outcome of that. If you have a culture that's truly inclusive and encourages and fosters a sense of belonging, diversity is an outcome. So we care about hiring and providing careers to the best people out there, and you cannot, and it's impossible to do that without creating that inclusive culture where everybody feels their voice is heard, they belong, and diversity is just an outcome of that. So that's the way we look at it, and it's just business. It's just pure business sense.
I love that, Avril, and I love that you highlighted the fact that it's not for social reasons, it's for business reasons, and it's highly aligned with that. Thank you so much, Avril. Gopinath, could we hear from you, please?
Yeah, for us, diversity starts with leadership commitment and a shared responsibility across the entire organization. We have 4 stakeholders, if I may have to say. One is our employees. We ensure equity through employee experience, talent attraction, acquisition, development, advancement, and retention. The other big piece, which a lot of people talk about, is customer, right? We also are socially conscious about the business reasons. My fellow panelists spoke about building our brand reputation as a leader in our services solutions for diverse needs. It's just not for us, but also ensuring our diverse needs of our customers. And at the end of the day, Verizon is a part of the society, right, that we belong in. We want to make sure we foster economic inclusion as well, community engagement, and bring about a positive change. Last but not the least, it's our shareholders as well. We also ensure that we have diverse shareholders. We belong to a society. We have customers, our employees. As a company, right, we execute our diversity strategy. We want to increase our customer relevance. And that happens through diversity as enabling innovation, driving growth, and ultimately able to differentiate our brand and creating a trust from all our stakeholders. Our commitment to equality reflects our purpose-driven culture. So that's what I would like to say, Neha.
Lovely, Gopinath. And like I said earlier, first of all, it's great to see that Verizon believes in diversity. And secondly, it's great to have you as our reverse diversity today. So thank you so much for joining us. Great. Mitali, can we hear from you, please?
Thank you, Neha. I think there's a little bit more that anyone can add to what Avril and Gopinath already shared, right? Diversity and inclusion, I think they go hand in hand. At Intel, we believe that Intel's purpose is to create technology that enriches the lives of every individual on Earth. And we simply cannot do that if we focus and engage only on a section of the entire population. And we like to think, I'm a part of a client computing group, the group that creates laptops. And we often joke about, and I have 2 8-year-old daughters. And we have conversations on, imagine if, we had a team of 10 engineers who design Intel laptops, and they are all in the age group of 5 to 10, right? And they're all girls. Can you imagine how the laptops would look like? They'll be either pink or purple, covered in glitter. They'll have magical power cords that will be flying in and out. And they'll have probably 5 or 6 keys. Now, fortunately, we don't have that team at Intel. We have a diverse team which looks at what the responsibilities are going to be, what the usages are going to be. And that's why, going back to what Avril mentioned, it just makes business sense for us to invest and bring in diversity into the workplace. And diversity at workplace for us gives us the ability to tap into a wide range of talent, right? Not just that belong to a particular view or gender or ethnicity or even a particular geography, right? It allows us as a company to unbox and provide access, right, to the needs, aspirations, motivations for our larger customer base that we have today. And also, as we've seen that as we bring in greater diversity into a team, it changes the way the team processes the information, internalizes the information, the way the debate, design alternatives, pros and cons. It just brings in the richness of what we want in a particular team. And Intel, I've been with Intel for 16 years now, and I've seen Intel committed to advance diversity and inclusion throughout our global workforce and industry. And there are tons of initiatives that the company and I'm sure we'll share some of that also. But as people in the world are going through digital transformations, it is important, and it's not just a moral responsibility, like Avril said, right? It does make business sense for us that we look holistically at the workforce that we engage, the vendors that we work with, the customers that we work with. And there is no other way to move forward than to really design our company ecosystem just the way nature is designed, which is diversity built in.
At some point, somebody has to say you're on mute when it comes to Zoom. But that's fantastic, Mitali. And I think that's a great driver, right? Your customers are diverse, so why should your employee base not be? Thank you for highlighting that. Priti, can you go next, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think enough said that this is a business imperative. And Mastercard being a payments network organization, I think we've come a long way in terms of embedding the diversity and inclusion into the journey. Our current focus remains to be the equity aspect of it. The men and women, diversity primarily, what is it? It's like, all the things that make us look similar or different that we can see, we cannot see, right? But an inclusion as including the people into different aspects. But there is need for us to really focus on, and enough said again about the society, and I spoke in the previous panel about we are including markets into what our products and solutions are all about, the financial inclusion, about having women participate into that journey, and how are we investing into the MSME segment to see that are the women entrepreneurs really getting that aspect of it in addition to our employees. But where our focus today, Neha, is all around equity, where we are examining and adjusting our systems. And these systems relate to people, which are our employees, our products and solutions, which is our market that we kind of define as pillar, and then the society, which is wider about building the pipeline of the women talent, the girl, we're cultivating a pipeline of women and girl talent that are kind of be the future of, putting that diversity on this space. And the times to come, though, doesn't have to really discuss more about what is DEI or how it is all about. So we're kind of examining, adjusting the systems to see that our diversity and inclusion principles are embedded in the way that the organization is run, whether it's our market as customers, stakeholders, or the wider society. The other inputs that I'd like to add to what other panelists have just mentioned.
Thank you, Priti, for that. And yes, it's amazing to see the kind of work that is being done on a holistic basis as Mastercard when it comes to diversity. Looking forward to hearing a lot more about the initiatives in the next discussions.
Absolutely.
But Ruhi, can we hear from you, please, about Accenture?
Thank you, Neha. Delighted to be here. And I think everybody's talking so impressive about the inclusion and diversity agenda. I'm really impressed, right? Because I really believe that, at Accenture, being an equitable workforce is not a choice, right? We really believe that the future of the workforce is going to be one where, everybody is equal. And our commitment to this is, starts right at the top at the leadership level. So our CEO has gone public with a public statement saying that, by 2025, we want to be a gender neutral workforce. And, I'm delighted to say that we are on our way there. But what does diversity really mean to us, right? If you look at the business scenario in our country today, we are the largest producers of STEM graduates as women across the world, right? India ranks first in the STEM graduates that we produce. But we rank 19 in terms of the jobs opportunities available to our women. And that itself shares the gap, right? We are leaving a lot of educated women behind by not providing them an active work life and an active career in organizations that we participate in. So, I'm sure that all of us understand the implications of this, because in an economy where a large portion of your educated workforce does not participate is hugely detrimental to the economy of the country that we are in. So I think there is a humongous amount of need for us to ensure that we not only attract but retain and grow the talent and diverse talent in the organizations that we work for. And therefore, the policies, the frameworks have to be aligned to ensuring that, we can not only provide enriching careers to our women, but also support them in various stages of their life. And just to quote, right, our research really shows that when women are provided with equal opportunities and investments to advance in their careers in an organization, I think everybody benefits. In organizations which have, more women in leadership positions, and advance, it's also the men who benefit from it. So about 23% of men, are more likely to go through the ranks, and their chances of, acquiring and retaining their leadership positions is extremely high and nearly doubled. And the research also says that, and this is an Accenture research, which I want to quote, it reconfirms the fact that bold leadership followed by comprehensive actions in creating an empowering environment for the women really drives a culture of equality. So I think for us, it's a business imperative that we not only retain, encourage, and ensure that our women rise to the top levels of leadership position, but also a commitment. It is a metric that sits on our scorecard. And the very fact that as a business leader, I handle the inclusion and diversity portfolio for the organization is itself indicative of the fact that, we are committed to ensuring that we create a very, very diverse workforce. So thank you for the opportunity, Neha, and back to you.
Well, thank you, Ruhi, and we're really looking forward to hearing more about all the initiatives that Accenture is doing, because you'll have definitely taken on a very formidable goal of having diversity in the workplace. And, and like you said, it's great to see that business is behind that goal. So thank you for joining us today. Great. Shubhashri, could we hear from you, please? You're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you, Neha. Thank you so much for having me here. Why does Sodexo, care about building diversity? Sodexo really cares for it because it is a business imperative for us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been the cornerstone of growth strategy at Sodexo. The leaders at Sodexo strongly believe that the diversity metrics is as important as the gross profit numbers. The top echelon of the company is directly responsible and committed to the D&I agenda. We as leaders relentlessly strive and create a balanced ecosystem in our workplace. And we also noticed and we also demonstrated that greater the representation, the higher the likelihood of outperformance. And as leaders, we always strive to provide equal opportunities to people of, different genders, varying beliefs, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, and sexual orientation. Of course, we also include a lot of people with different disabilities. So, in each and everything that we do, we definitely give a lot of importance to diversity. It's not that, we just have to do it, so we are doing it. Very quickly, the organization experience the benefits. And we can see that it translates into something like, this works for me. This makes us a better and sharper company. And that is why we are doing this. It took a couple of years in the beginning, but quickly our middle managers were on board, and they also started to see the benefits. And it's like it adds value to us as a business, and it also helps us as a company. That's why we are doing it. And there was a gender balance case study, and we did it internally in all our international entities. We covered over 50,000 managers in 70 entities. And the key findings of this study was that financial and non-financial KPIs were better in the work locations where the diversity ratio is between 40 and 60%. So I can tell you the KPIs as well. The first one is the operating margins, then comes employee retention, client retention, safety, and employee engagement. And the highest number comes for employee engagement. So when you have engaged employees, then which means you have productive employees. So automatically, it says that it supports our business so much, and that is why we have a lot of importance to diversity. Whenever there is a lesser than 40%, we see that they're not able to meet these KPIs as much as the diverse regions do. And when it is more than 60%, we could also see that it is plateauing in some areas. So that is the study that we have done. So we try to keep each and every job location of Sodexo between 40 and 60%, and that's what we always try to do.
So, Vasri, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I hope the people in the audience were taking notes that if you were having any resistance in convincing business about the importance of diversity, then that's just the way to do it. Yeah, to actually show them the numbers. And I'm so happy to hear that, the numbers have spoken for themselves. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Neha.
Great. And last but not the least, Tina, I'm assuming that with your name, you're used to this, but please go ahead.
Well, it's amazing to hear how organizations here have a holistic integrated DEI into their workplaces. So, it's really enriching. I'd love to know more about the Sodexo research. So I'll definitely reach out to Subhashri. For Thoughtworks, I think, when we talk about DEI, I look at what the purpose is for the organization, right? And when we define the purpose of our organization, it's not defined by the leadership or the stakeholders. It's defined by thought workers who actually contribute in coming up with the purpose of the organization. Recently, when we did this exercise, we came up with a purpose statement, which is Thoughtworks' purpose is to create extraordinary impact on the world through our culture and technology excellence. And you'll have to note that culture plays a huge role, right? A huge role in how engaged, how inclusive, and how equitable your workplace is, and how you really feel a sense of belonging in your workplace. Simply speaking, DEI has been fundamental to our values, culture, business, and community, and we have tried to integrate it across every aspect of our business. We've been, I think, privileged to have a founder who truly believed that organizations and corporations have a larger role to play in driving positive social change and challenging systemic injustices. And as a technology company, we do believe that tech can be a great enabler in building a better tomorrow. It's also critical, I think, to assimilate DEI thinking into your everyday practices, right? Whether it's your day-to-day rituals, your interactions, your engineering practices, typically your entire ways of working. And especially with the pandemic, we've realized, how we'll have to adapt our ways of working to the remote and virtual context. The reality also is our workplace is an extension of our lives. We build our connections, our experiences, learnings, failures, form relationships, and so much more here. And today in the virtual context, it's been challenging, but engagement forms a big part of what we do in the DEI space. So keeping in mind intersectionality, lived experiences, individual identities, and not all of us start at the same place is what our focus on DEI is. Specifically around DivHERsity and the focus on gender diversity, right? The World Economic Forum report says that the impact of the pandemic has, in fact, increased the gender gap from 99.5 years to 135.6 years, which means it will take another generation to actually see a gender equitable work. That forms a big, big focus for us at Thoughtworks. In fact, Thoughtworks aspires to be 40% women and underrepresented gender minorities by end of 2022. It's a big goal. And we're primarily focusing on women and underrepresented gender minorities in tech, because If you look at it in operations, you'll see, a higher percentage of women, but you don't really see them in the tech industry and playing hardcore technical roles. So that's the reason why we focus on women and underrepresented gender minorities in tech. In addition to that, as a diverse company, right, spread across 17 regions, we realized that every region has many underrepresented groups that is specific to, their history. And so each region is also asked to focus on an underrepresented group that's specific to their region. So, for example, it is Black and Indigenous people of color in North America. China has chosen people with disability. In India, it is LGBTQ+. And across the 17 regions, you see this diverse areas of focus that really bring a lot more connection and meaning to how we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplace.
Wow, I love that, Tina, and that's very interesting to hear about diversity policies on an everyday basis, because absolutely it's not just one particular initiative or program, but it's actually driving it every single day. And I'm glad about the kind of goals that you'll have taken for gender diversity. And it's also great to see the focus on tech, because at the end of the day, that is the future of jobs, and need to get more women representation there. So with that, I'm going to move to our next segment to discuss that for about the next half an hour. And once I read out the question, would love for whoever is ready to raise their hand, and I can call out to you accordingly. But the next segment, I would love for us to discuss specifically on how we can increase women participation in companies. So, for example, if there was any particular initiative that has been taken by your company that has been successful in increasing the number of women hired in your workplace. Because like some of you might have seen in my opening address, the number of women in corporate India is actually declining. From an already low number, the pandemic has made things worse. And we need to figure out how we can stem this steep decline and reverse the trend. So these could include any specific policies that you'll have changed to attract and retain women, any specific hiring initiatives that have helped, or any particular women returning programs that are helping in increasing women's re-entry. So if one of you would like to go first, Ruhi, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. No, I think brilliant initiatives being done across all the organizations that we talked about, and I would just like to highlight a few things. So, one of the things that Tina talked about, this whole pandemic increasing the gap between how women have been dealt with in the pandemic, right? The gap which has widened in terms of the opportunities that have been available to them, and they've been dropping out. So, I think a lot of societal pressures on our women today, right? They are being treated as the primary caregivers, and it makes it very difficult for them to balance that out. And I always believe that women do two jobs, directly every day of their life, and do multiple multitasking roles as they go along. So I think as organizations, we have to take a very conscious view of that. How do we want to bring in more women and retain them and support them through these various stages of life? And Tina touched upon intentionality of careers and intentionality of building technology acumen. The pandemic has also thrown up a lot of opportunities for women. If you look at it, the technology gap, the availability of gig workforce, technology-enabled workforce, skilled workforce has widened, right? The number of people available for jobs is immensely low. So this also gives us an opportunity to encourage women to lift their hands up and, participate in returning programs, participate in, uplifting them from a technology perspective. So as a inclusion and diversity lead, some of the focused actions that we've done, I'll just talk about a few of them, and then I'm sure the rest will chip in, is how do we enable women to, acquire the technology acumen to be able to lift their hands up and opt for roles which will, catapult their careers in technology. So there are some programs specifically which we, have led with at various career levels. So one of the programs is Grow Women in Leadership. And this is a very specific program that we've launched for our women, which is a 4.5-month program, which takes them through the journey of creating future leaders. And, we've been very successful in this program. We've created, 51% of the women have gone ahead and got into leadership roles based on that. So I think it's an opportunity for us because all these women are delivery leaders. They have the delivery acumen on technology projects. What they lack is the business acumen. So as a holistic business leader, how do we help them build in this business acumen and understand, how they could be future leaders? And this program has been phenomenally successful. It's won the Brandon Hall Award for Best Leadership Program this year, and I'm very proud of it. The next program is, talking about how do you build skills on data and analytics? How do you build skills on AI? So we've launched a program called as Quantum Edge, which really helps women acquire these skills. And one of the programs we've been very successful is called as CyberHER. We wanted to create a workforce of women who were security evangelists in an organization. And we particularly kept it only for women. We asked for nominations because we wanted women to lead with intentionality of careers, right? They wanted to participate so that the acceptance is higher. And this program went away to become a great success because a lot of women lifted their hands up and said, yeah, because it was a women's only program, it was dealt with. And they were very successful in going through the program to create the first. We wanted 100 CyberHER specialists, but we ended up getting 600 of them because that was the number of women who, wanted to participate in the program. So I think intentionality of a career is extremely important. And Tina touched upon it because, technology is a great enabler at the end of the day. When you're put into a role, it is not because you are a woman. It is because you bring in that skill. You are skilled to do that job. So I think that is very important. And touching upon the community aspect of it, right? So, we have been leading with a mantra which says, leaving no one behind. So there's a program called as Arambh, which we've launched specifically for women from the weaker sections of the society. And we pick up these young girls who are educated and give them a very focused internship program to build technology skills for them over a period of 12 to 16 weeks, right? We take them through a very specific program. And then they join in mainstream Accenture as a workforce. And this has also been very successful because young kids, people with disabilities who did not have an opportunity to join an organization like Accenture are now enabled to be a part of our active workforce. So, I think very important for us to understand the need of the society that we work in and help create programs which will bridge those gaps and ensure that we are able to create a workforce of the future, irrespective of their pedigrees. So, these are some of the programs I wanted to talk about, Neha, but I'll give an opportunity to others to also take forward.
Thank you, Ruhi. Really happy to hear that because we have seen at JobSaha that there is a lot of upskilling required for women in technology. So if we can get companies like yours to provide that, to open up those skilling opportunities to women, then we can push more of them into the latest technologies. So thank you for sharing that. Gopinath, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be talking about specific programs, but I think the way Verizon believes, right, like Tina spoke and Ruhi spoke, we believe in the culture, right? We believe in the culture. The first, we want to see we have the strong cultural foundations. And if we have the strong cultural foundations, results are going to follow, right? So we started all our leaders and everybody in the organization going through an unconscious bias program, respectful work programs. That were the fundamental things. And then we started off with our recruiters, right? Looking at, sensitizing them, sensitizing our hiring managers. And most importantly, right, to the point that we went and saw how our leaders were writing the JDs. Were they really gender neutral JDs that's in the first place? Are we having that discrimination come out there, right there in that space? Then we looked at what's our panel doing, right? For example, like this panel, I'm the diversity here, right? But if we are all having men out there interviewing women, are we having an equitable, gender neutral panel as well? So I think some of these were the fundamental guards that we put in place, right from the beginning. And also incentivizing our vendor partners, right? Just not us, but our vendor partners as well, our ecosystem as well. Of course, stepping on to the technology part, right, in terms of returning women, right? I think we all have these programs, but what really is how do we sensitize the hiring manager in terms of what is the support enablement that is needed for a returning women diverse candidate? And in terms of what is the peer group network that she has, and also the fact that remains is the ecosystems around it. How do we build that 6 months? How do we gradually bring them back to work? That's something that we work with Catalyst and a lot of other people, right, in instilling that piece. I think Ruhi spoke about women as women from the weaker sections. We have a strong program called Project Athena, where we bring in women specifically from remote parts of India. And all that we look at is we bring them up, provide them a 6 months intensive course. They go through this, and they're free to apply for any jobs within Verizon. We are very proud about one of the unique programs that we run, because that also opens up, right? When we work with them, we also realize the fact that, it's not like you come and join Verizon and we pay you, but we had to go and convince their parents to say, how is a company even paying somebody for, willing to teach somebody and pay them at the same time to travel to. And also we had unique challenges like, going to a remote village in Orissa and saying, are we human traffickers, right? It was very difficult for them to believe, right? And we had to re-look at some of our policies to say that, hey, you know what? You come and reimburse your tickets. That's not going to work. You will have to buy a ticket for them. You will have to find an accommodation for them. I think we have to look inward to say, hey, we need to reinvent ourselves. And when I look inward, right, I also think about women. We have a program that's Women of the World, right, running across, and it's the 3rd year in succession, right? And when we're talking about that, roughly around 200, 300 women across in a leadership forum where there's leaders sponsoring you, doing stuff. I think the last program graduated. This program is about to graduate. We're going to see a lot more leaders in our society. And to Tina's problem, women in tech, right? When we took a closer look of women in tech, we saw women leaders in technology, but actual technology on the architecture side, on the those sides, we really found lesser and lesser women coming in. So we incubated a program. While I say we incubated, none of these was done by me. The DE&I Council, right, which is also led by a lot of women, invested a lot of time, came up with a program. I'm happy to say today we have 100 women going through those. And I'm very hopeful of a day where we'll have close to 30% or 50% of our architects being women, right? So that's one. And last but not the least, right, we all spoke about the pandemic, right? The women had slightly different challenges during the pandemic, right? You were a caregiver, you were at home, you had to do work at the same time, right? Simple things like, hey, what can I take off your plate, right? So if you had to provide caregiving responsibilities for somebody in your at your home, anybody, not you with COVID, you could take 8 days of leave. Right? Sorry, no, you could take 8 weeks of leave. Make sure that your family is up there. Provide help, assistance to them if needed. Second is, I'm sure somebody in your family is down, right? You're doing caregiver responsibilities. You're giving other responsibilities as well. And in the whole of this, you'll have to cook for yourself too. All you need to do is pick up the phone and just say, Verizon, can I get my lunch, breakfast, and dinner delivered home for everybody in your house? We did that. But we truly believe, right, we needed to take things away out of what. And let me tell you, this was just not for our women, right? It was just even for our men, right? So we wanted to make sure that this reaches everybody. What can we do for our employees? I can talk on and on and on about these, but I'm happy to hear from my fellow panelists, rest of them.
Wow, Gopinath, I loved all the ideas, and I especially love the idea of sending breakfast, lunch, dinner home for all the employees. If only somebody was doing that for me too, that would be great.
Yeah, I was a beneficiary myself for this, and it put me in good stead at my own home, saying that, hey, you know what, my wife was down with COVID, and I said, don't worry, this is what we do. And she said, she was really happy about the fact that, okay, right, I'm a bad cook, of course. So that's not, she had food delivered, and she didn't have to think about one thing. If we can take that one thing out of your employee's head, I think that creates a lot of traction.
Yeah. No, so also what I loved was it's really the small things, and sometimes we take that for granted. We feel that our recruiters already are sensitized, our hiring managers already are sensitized, but we'll be shocked to see the kind of biases that exist. And then those biases get projected in the interview to women, and especially returnee women. And at JobServe, we've seen this year on year on year. So having, looking at the root cause of the problems and trying to nip them is also really great. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Gopinath. Tina, can we go to you next?
It's wonderful to hear everything organizations are doing in the inclusions, specifically inclusions in the equity space, right? It's because all of us realize that diversity is important for our businesses. Over the years, I think, Thoughtworks has been through its journey around DEI, right? We made our mistakes. We've gone, we've taken different tracks. We've gone back and we've come back again with a different approach. But one thing I think that is critical is a leadership that absolutely believes that DEI is important for your business, for your people, for your sustainability as well for your business, right? And today we look at 4 critical areas under DEI. One is finding and nurturing diverse talent. I think in Thoughtworks, one thing that we absolutely believe in is making Thoughtworks reflective of the community we live in. The community is diverse, the society is diverse, and that needs to be reflected internally. So we have a lot of programs to actually, that's actually focused on sourcing and hiring diverse, underrepresented groups and communities. Vaapasi is one such program and has been an award-winning program for the last few years. The other area is advancement and opportunities, right? You can bring in as many people as possible and as diverse as possible, but how do you create equal and equitable opportunities for all? Whether it is leadership development programs, whether it is day-to-day mentoring, cultivating each other, and supporting each other. I think one of the biggest things, positive things that I personally feel like we have achieved as a collective is the fact that everyone feels like being inclusive and being equitable is their responsibility in the organization. You'll hear amazing stories from thought workers talking about, hey, I was part of Vaapasi mentorship, group. I was part of Interning with Pride mentorship group, and you will learn the recipients of that support, that coaching. Talk about how that has enabled them to grow and feel included in the organization. So I think advancement, opportunity, growth, succession planning, leadership development programs, all of that is very, very critical. The other area is around inclusion and belonging. And I think some of my co-panelists touched upon it. And we all assume, right? Like, okay, as humans, we've all gone through our own lived experiences. All of us are inclusive. And all of us in this panel and across the globe who work in the DI space have all unconscious biases. And that's a reality. We live with these biases every single day. And these are small things. And there are big things as well. As we see everything that's happening around the world, right? It's very important to focus on our biases. So there's a lot of effort in terms of, just investing in learning as a community, whether it is inviting external speakers, whether it's unconscious bias training, whether it's a sensitization training on LGBTQ plus inclusion, or just having debates and conversations and in listening to the voice of dissent. I think that's very, very important. We need to hear the voice of dissent. Why are we only focusing on gender, for example, right? Why is Vaapasi only for women was one of the questions. Don't men take a break and want to get back? And so, in fact, that's something we're experimenting this year with, where we're going to do a mixed group for our returnee program. And so these are insights that you will get from people on the ground, and you will have to listen to it through your employee resource groups, through your affinity groups, through the voices of people who are talking to you. So approachable leadership is very, very critical, I think, from a cultural standpoint. And one other, and of course, there is the area around retention and people policies, right? very, very critical, your benefits, your policies. You're constantly relooking and analyzing and looking at, hey, in the current context, I'm sure many organizations have relooked at their policies in the context of the pandemic and remote and virtual work environment. We relooked at our entire, prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace policy. We looked at our equal opportunity policy. We looked at our flexible remote working policy, and across the globe, you would see so many inputs that we have received from Thoughtworkers. But it's very, very important to really look at, okay, in the virtual context, what harassment is possible, what sexual harassment is possible. And so I think that is important. Insights-led decision-making around DEI is very important, especially with our focus around gender diversity. We have a dashboard that actually monitors gender diversity, right from representation to attrition to hiring trends, split by regions, split by groups, split by grades. And this offers a lot of insight. And of course, listening to the voice of your people through surveys. We have a global diversity and engagement survey, and that data is powerful insight for leaders, for DEI leads, for DEI councils to look at what changes that we want to bring about through the voice of the people.
That's amazing, Tina. And especially when it comes to Vapasi, at JobSaha also, we have seen the wonders that program has created. Because again, it's not necessarily just a funnel for Thoughtworks. You're actually working on upskilling and creating a candidate pipeline for women in general. And I'm looking forward to also hearing more about that program in the workshops that's going to happen in the second half of the day. Plus, we'd love to actually connect later and hear a little bit about the changes you'll have made to your policies post-pandemic too. I think that would be great sharing for other companies too. So thank you for mentioning
Definitely.
Great, thank you. Mitali, can we hear from you, please?
Sure, thank you. And it is amazing to hear all the policy changes, programs, and just the thought behind from my panelists here, right? Gopinath, Tina, Ruhi so far. And let me just add, focus inwards in terms of how Intel is approaching increasing women participation in the company. This goes back, Neha, to your question of how do you get women? And we look at it in 3 stages. One is how do we hire? How do we grow them once they're inside the company? And then how do we retain them? So that, when we bring in and then we create a nurturing environment so that they are staying with the company. And we are intentional at all of these stages, right? And it starts with hiring. I want to go back to what Gopinath mentioned. We have transformed our hiring practices over the years. Intel is a 50-year-old company. When it started, it started with, who can work in the fabs, right? A lot has changed in the last 50 years. It's no longer just people working in the fabs. It's also Intel is growing in the software industry. So changing the perception around what kind of work environment exists. So that's talking more about it, ensuring that folks understand the kind of work that you come into Intel and do it. When we look at inclusive hiring practice, it's, simple things like you will have diversity in your panel when you interview. That's one. And then making sure that the job descriptions that are posted, again, Gopinath touched upon it very nicely, is making sure that the job description doesn't exclude a section of who is going to apply. As a hiring manager, as an example, if I have a senior position to fill, then we actually have policies which looks at, have you looked at and interviewed the female candidates, as an example, that have applied to the job before you make a call and extend the offering. So these are guardrails which enforces that we take the unconscious bias that Tina was referring to. We all suffer from unconscious bias. It's most of the time unintentional, but it is there. So having such policies, which is forcing how we review resumes, how we approach candidates, how we interview them, how we look at the variety, that helps us in increasing the chances of hiring and at least giving a level playing field to the candidates that are applying. Now, in terms of programs, there is a Intel H2O program, which is home to office. It is a women returnee program where we look at how do we support women who have taken a break, whether it is for maternity, which is, mostly why we have seen where, women take a break when they are, when they have a kid and they want to return back to the workforce after a couple of years of break. So we look at providing internship opportunities, bringing them on board for a year of probation where we support, we pay the employees and they get trained, right? And the end of the year, depending on how things pan out, they can be hired full-time into the company. So we have seen many success stories, and it's less about the numbers, but more about the stories that you hear from one or two who says, I was a part of the H2O program, not me per se, but, I've run into employees who say, I did go through this H2O program and it was amazing because it gives you the flexibility, the tools to ramp up on the latest technologies. Because when you took a break 5 years ago, right, things were different. The technology industries and the coding languages, as an example, were different. So this is in terms of how we bring folks in. There is another program called Bandhan program, which is focused on parenting and how do we create a supporting environment for females and males that go through the life-changing events of parenting. And Bandhan talks about manager sensitization in terms of how do you manage an employee, and creates policies around for people who are going on maternity leave. So starting before maternity leave, through the period of the leave, and then how do we reintegrate back into the workforce. Intel, in terms of policies, has a maternity leave of 26 weeks. We recently also did a paternity leave of 6 weeks, so that there's a lot of co-parenting that is happening, and it's more predominant right now, and it encouraging some of that. There are other policy changes around, if you have miscarriages, you have leave, paid leave, and fertility treatment. Some of those are recent changes in policies that have come in. Of course, flexible working hours. I mean, as a mother and as someone who takes care of, elders in the family, the flex working hours is the biggest benefit that, I look back and can appreciate what the company can do for an individual. And in the pandemic, it just, makes a 10x difference in terms of, which company, where I want to, as an example, my manager doesn't care. And I've seen that across the company. When you log in and when you log out, as long as the work is done. And that is a lot of relief when I'm trying to, as an individual, right? And it's applicable to men and women as well in trying to juggle the workforce. Now, when we were all on campus, there were infrastructure changes in the structure as well, where you had nursing mothers, you have a baby room on every floor of the building so that you can go and pump. You have special parking for expecting mothers so that you don't have to, we have multi-level parking and everything else. And the last thing you want for a expecting mother is to walk, a mile, right? So some of those are small things, but it made a lot of difference for folks. And for females working, if you have to work late, for example, for specific timelines and all, there is security for anyone who's working beyond 8 p.m. This is when, we were back on campus. Now, when I step back and look at holistically goals and numbers that the company has taken, we have taken a goal of, and Intel is talking about the RISE 2030 goals, which is looking at diversity, but sustainability, and, how do we become a responsible corporation in the whole ecosystem. So we have a goal of increasing the number of our senior architects and technical women by 40%. We have a goal of doubling the number of women and underrepresented minorities in senior leadership by the year 2030, right? And that is 2x the number. And then we talked about the inclusive leadership practices, and it starts from our CEO. If you hear Pat Gelsinger talk about how he views the diversity and inclusion, you can see that in terms of how the entire company is rallying behind the CEO's thought process. Let's talk a little bit about how do you grow the women once they get into the workforce. Senior leadership predominantly is still a male dominated. So the way you interview vice presidents or corporate vice presidents, the panels that comes in is still, skewed, right? I would love that it would change, but it's going to take us years to go there. So there are specific programs where we have identified at a global level, right? It's called Women Leadership Academy, where you look at high-performing individuals, females, over the last few years, consistent high-performing developers, and you curate a program where you pair some of these employees with your executive leadership team one by one, right? And it's less of a mentoring, but more of a sponsorship program. So in rooms where I don't have a seat at the table or another employee doesn't have a seat at the table, there is someone who's advocating for you, who's saying, let's look at these up and coming individuals and give them the opportunity. So that's how you actually truly invest in employee growth and development and bring them up. So these are some of the ways how Intel is intentional about how we grow senior women leadership and actually make the change at the C-suite level. I'll talk a little bit, stepping back when we talk about pipeline.
Mitali, sorry. I just want to make sure that we get to the other panelists also. And
of course.
There's a lot of questions coming in on chat, which I definitely want to make sure we get time for as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Don't mind, let's go to some of the more initiatives, because it's obvious, of course, that there are a huge number of initiatives, programs, policies that Intel is doing. And I'm sure you're seeing it in the numbers, because we've also seen it at JobSaha in terms of the number of awards that Intel is receiving this year over the last year. That it's obviously the result of a lot of hard work that is being done behind it. So kudos to the entire team for that.
Absolutely, Neha.
Yeah, thank you, Mitali. Great. Priti, could we hear a little bit from you, please?
Sure. And in the interest of time, I'll try to cover the headlines. So, Neha, we this year, because COVID hit us in 2020, and we started looking at things, how can we look differently, when everything is virtual. We've launched a program called Urja, which means energy, and we want to rub the positive energy across the organization. And we under this umbrella of Urja, we put in place interventions around talent acquisition, engagement, retention, and of course, development, last but not the least. And if I talk about talent acquisition, and enough talked already about the slates and everything else, but I'd like to say that for talent acquisition for women specifically, we're using a pull and a push both. So we do have, as any other multinational corporation would have, that we have a slate that for each position that we hire, we have to have a woman candidate who goes right up to the interview, and the finalist top 3 candidates has to have a woman. But if you don't have a woman, there has to be an exception approval. Unless that you don't get that woman in the interview list, there's an exception approval process, and there's a bit of a push to get women on that table. But that's something we're trying. But we also leveraging AI, artificial intelligence, where we're trying to understand from job description the skills required and to what the requirement of the job is. So there's a also helping managers hire the right talent, whether they're men or women. So that's the second aspect of it. We do have women returnship program, relaunch your career, and women, and then we have something which is India specific program that is about helping women who've taken a career break. But I think it is important that I talk about an initiative that we've been quite successful this year, and we tagged it as Colleagues for Life. What is it? It's all about managing the alumni. We also a huge attrition during COVID times for women for taking care of their child or the elder care. And what we've done is we created a platform and a network where we have reached out to these women who resigned, and we tried to see that the boomerang is really starting to observe that people are wanting to come back and join back as Mastercard. So that's really quite a successful one, and tapping onto the alumni of Mastercard women is really helping us drive that as an agenda. We do have certain roles because we've learned in past 24 months or so that there are certain roles that can be 100% work from home. And we've identified that, and we're trying to see that, and it's not for men only, but well, not for women, but for men and women both, that which are the roles that can be done from any location. So work from anywhere, and we yet to dwell into the gig stuff itself, but then we're trying to really experiment first with 100% work from home. On the upskilling, we've launched something called Learning Academies across the globe. Now, Learning Academies, everything's virtual or hybrid as we go along into this whole journey. We're introducing something called as Netflix of learning. So take a pause when you want to take a break to do something else, but then restart the learning where you left your, season 1, episode 5, to really go back and see. Like other panelists that they spoke about the future. So we have specific learning and development interventions for our managers who want to become leaders, and for women, for the leaders who want to be successful as leaders. So we call it Future Leader Program, Women Who Lead, etc. on the skilling side. But I think I should also talk about the rewards and the well-being, because that's taken priority over everything else. We've invested heavily onto, of course, we have to ensure the pay equity, and this was a question that came in the previous panel as well. We do have external auditors who look at our pay equity for men and women, and that's consistent that for every man that earns $1, a woman is earning $1 for the same role that he or she performs. Whether he or she's taken a career break or not, we have to offer the right compensation for the individuals. But we've invested a lot into the family building program. I think COVID taught us that, there's a lot more focus on the family, people who are delaying various decisions of family building. So we kind of have implemented the parental leave. So paternity leave, of course, 16 weeks in India. We've got more maternity leave, but paternity leave is certainly 16 weeks for all our men colleagues who have to take a break to look after a young one. We've kind of invested in surrogacy, adoption, and fertility treatments. And this is not that we've kind of gone with the insurance companies that here is the insurance program. We're offering this as a reimbursement because it still remains to be taboo at some places that, how do we go about it? How will I be treated by my manager, my peers, and everything else? So we're saying, here is the amount that you will take as a reimbursement from a place. Go and get yourself what you want to really do, look after your family building program from a place and a space that you would like to be. When I say place, which vendor, which partner, your choice. Space, which location, and everything else is your choice. And we're not limiting these surrogacy, adoption, or fertility treatments to only what a hospital care would look like, but includes all the fees from legal documentation, support from our legal counsel, to ensuring there's an emotional support and counseling that is required for the family members, which are immediate family members, but extended family members as well, because surrogacy or adoption needs extended families to be really having acceptance for what the individual set of family members are doing. That's on the family building program. From a well-being perspective, we had a lot more focus. And what we've done is we've kind of announced that each one of our employee can work for 4 weeks from any part of the world. So if you want to be with your family, so it's 4 weeks, any part of the world. And we've also announced that for more mental well-being and all social, emotional well-being, we have every Friday, second half of the Friday is a rest of Friday, where people can, while they are working, but then they can invest that half Friday every week, entire year, to invest into learning and development, reading, or just doing some meditation or yoga and everything else. And I'm sure most of the organizations have implemented those apps that we have for all our employees. We offer mobile phones to each one of our employees. So that comes, so Thrive, Live Well apps, which are on, well-being, on meditation, yoga, or any of the exercises. People can use those Fab Fridays or Rest of Fridays to do that. And last but not the least, in the interest of time, I do agree with some of the fellow panelists. So we do believe at Mastercard, what gets measured gets done. We have our councils and committee members, and right up to our global CEO and the board of directors, the reports kind of on the diversity status, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all three aspects around how we're removing the unconscious bias. And we have something called as Mastercard way, how we're faring against them is getting tracked and reported. So it's a lot to cover, but then in a nutshell, these are some of the interventions that have helped us drive the diversity, inclusion, and equity agenda to really ensure that we remain to be the place where best talent chooses to be, and then we continue to offer them priceless possibilities.
It was truly amazing to hear that, Priti, and yeah, we're definitely seeing that in the results today as well, and we're looking forward to seeing many more details in the workshops that will be there this summer. But when it comes to paternity leave, I have to just call out. Sorry, I think somebody needs to go on mute. Bella, can you go on mute, please? Okay, so about paternity leave specifically, I'd love to call out that in our surveys, we're definitely on the minority point side because, and even as Mitali mentioned, because only 30% of large enterprises and 18% of SME startups provide more than 2 weeks of paternity leave. So yes, I know you called out that it's less than your maternity leave, but the fact that you're not doing so much when it comes to enabling young fathers in enjoying parenthood, that says a lot too. So thank you for highlighting that as well.
Thank you. 16 weeks, it's a good enough time for...
Exactly. And here we just get the cutoff even at 2 weeks. And at 2 weeks, we saw this huge drop-off happening. So it's really fantastic. Super. Subhashri, could we hear from you, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. There was so much of learning I got from rest of the panelists. It was really great listening to all of you. So we have several interventions like mentorship programs, which are measured, of course, and employee resource groups that are active and focused on developing the women who are working with us. There are several D&I programs, training programs, which are specific to inclusion efforts that we do, called Spirit of Inclusion, etc. And more importantly, employees are always guided to cultivate a culture, an environment that is totally inclusive. So efforts are taken to ensure that job roles are empowered for women, gender neutral job titles were introduced, women uniforms were co-created, so that they are also comfortable wearing them. And there are safety shoes that women use. So some of them are really heavy. So we ensure safety as well as we try to make some efforts to see that, they are slightly easier to use for women. And care is given to, to provide awareness on the unconscious bias wherever needed. So we regularly try and support the business teams to change the thought process that some roles are designated for women and some of them can be done only by men. So this is something which we wanted to break, and we are breaking it to so that I would say that breakthrough initiatives have been implemented with a lot of confidence. Like we have women forklift operators, we have senior chefs who are women, electricians, plumbers, ETP operators in several client locations. So these are the things which we give, not only give importance to the number of the diversity ratio, we give importance to having women on unique roles, so that if we have some of them like this, then the rest of the job locations, the rest of the leadership, they learn and they also want to implement such things. So such successes, these women employees are successfully working with Sodexo, and they are the telltale sign of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. There are certain things which come in numbers. We have the baseline in numbers, like already my co-panelists spoke about. 50% of the regular positions we would ask for women candidature, and 30% of the frontline roles are mandatorily filled by women. So these will ensure that we are growing in our numbers progressively, and we have certain specific things like more referral incentives being offered to the referees for giving a women candidate reference. And when we have a vacancy which was created by a woman employee, that vacancy will be filled up only with a woman employee. We will never fill a woman vacancy with a male. This is something which requires COO level and the D&I head approval for, if they have a genuine concern or if there is a real reason to it. Even then, we will ask for a replacement. We compensate it elsewhere. So all this we do not just for numbers, it's just for creating the culture there and people understand how important it is. Project Priti is there. That project is for ensuring the number between 40 and 60%, which I already mentioned. So those are the sites which are called out for ensuring that we maintain the gender balance between 40 and 60%. We have spouse hiring. So there are several remote locations where when women are not able to travel and go, or sometimes they, we face attrition also in such sites. So there or everywhere, we also provide spouse hiring. This is to improve the retention of women and to encourage, families to work together with us. There is a special program for second career of women who are on a break. They are welcome back. We also have a win back program for all our alumni employees. We are in connect with all the women employees who had worked with us, and any position that opens up, we send an SMS to them and they can apply back to us. There is focus on sexual harassment in workplace. Since ours is a large region and we are spread across a huge geography, we do not want employees to wait for the central committee members to respond to them. So to ensure that the committee members are reachable to all, and there is a quick turnaround time and care that is given to the cases, we have a regional ICC committee as well. And our business operates in segments. So separate reporting and care is given for each segment in numbers, so that there is a good, it's like a positive competition that's going on between the segments. And we do more and more on improving women in our organization. There is a performance-linked incentive that is mapped for doing, a good gender balance in the operating sites. Recognition programs are linked to it, and we call the sites which have 40 to 60% gender balance as angel sites. And succession management also tracks women employees' growth separately with a lot of care and attention. There is awareness session against the violence for women employees. So we also give opportunity to women employees who have been victims of acid attack and burn victims. So this way we are also giving attention to these domestic violence victims. And flexible work policies and a lot of other policies are there, which will be covered in the workshops today. And the internship and shadowing called She Works is a very important thing, which women candidates are encouraged to come and observe the work that's happening, and they can apply for the jobs and they'll be placed. So this is one initiative that we do for hiring as well. There are different approaches, but I would like to divide them into qualitative and quantitative. You can see that we are working a lot with importance to metrics and data. That is basically for sustaining the progressing on gender balance, and to ensure that it's closely monitored. Here, in these kind of initiatives, we keep the numbers as the baseline. But on the other hand, there are a lot of initiatives that give a lot of qualitative importance, mentoring, coaching, internal job promotions, retention of women employees, understanding why somebody resigns. Is there a reason which we can support and then again retain them? So there is a lot of qualitative efforts also given to all. Thank you, Neha.
Okay, wow, Subhashi, and also it was actually very interesting to hear from you in terms of blue collar workers as well. Right?
Yes,
and improving diversity over there there are lots of different challenges that they face, and need to think from those perspectives.
So that is why I wanted to bring it to the table.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. And Avril, finally, we get to you. Please do share with us about the work that's happening at Morgan Stanley as well.
Thank you, Neha. There's nothing further to add from everything that the panelists have already spoken. I think it encompasses across the board what many of our organizations are doing in our own way. I will literally take 2 minutes only to make just 2 points. This is a complex social issue we are dealing with. It's not 1 year, 2 year, 3 year problem. It's a 130-year plus problem. So there's just a couple of things I'll say is whatever be the initiative that any organization is doing, two things are critical. One is sponsorship from the top, and I mean the top. I think your CEO, your management committees, your operating committees need to be bought into it, need to be talking about it, and need to be walking the talk. If that doesn't exist, it really doesn't matter what you're trying to drive. So focusing energies in working with and sometimes journeying with senior leaders is critical. And the second thing is related, and anything you do needs to have a long-term view. Again, as I said, 130 years, the World Economic Forum says. So it's very tempting sometimes to pick up something that is, I would say, interesting and in the moment. But this is a complex social issue, so long-term thinking. And I will illustrate that with a small example. Our Return to Work program is one of the programs we are really proud of. It has been gender neutral from day one. So we've had male applicants. It's been open to male applicants from day one. The other thing that we've also made sure of is it's a recruiting program. While there's an internship, etc., every intern that came in had a role at the end. The only differentiator would be whether they still wanted to work with us and their performance. It was never come train with us and go out there in the market. Because what would be the point of that? There's a lot of that going on. And we started this in 2015. And yes, it was very hard because who wants to commit a role to somebody that they're not sure about? And, it was a lot of working with senior leaders. It was a lot of long-term view. We started with 10 interns in 2015. We're welcoming close to 80 interns in 2022. So that's the story, right? And it's a long-term story. It's a 7-year story. But the summary of everything is senior sponsorship, take the long-term view, and just keep going. Nia, back to you.
Well, thank you, Avril, for bringing that in, because absolutely, right? Like seeing this room of such senior leaders, that just showcases why these companies are in the room today. Because there are such senior leaders who are actually driving that D&I practices over there. And without that, there's actually a question over here, which I'd love for you to take, which is a continuum to what you're saying. Which says that we have seen a lot of great aims and objectives by senior leaders at companies, but that doesn't translate into every level, and especially at the interview stage with different candidates. How are you addressing the trickle-down problem of diversity initiatives? Avril, would you like to take that? And if anybody else would also, please feel free to raise your hand.
So it is a problem, absolutely, and completely acknowledge and appreciate that. And and as I said, I will repeat at the risk of repeating myself, it is a function of persistence and time. If you are going to be measured by a senior leader, when I say walk the talk, I mean walk the talk. It's one thing for a leader to come in and say, I believe in D&I, but if he or she is not measuring their team on how they are contributing to D&I, then they are not walking the talk. So I think the trickle-down effect is a function of time, but also it's a function of enabling senior leaders to be able to hold their teams accountable, because that is the only way that all the links in the chain then align to align to the big picture and big vision. So holding people accountable for DEI objectives, it will take time. You can't fix it by going ground up. You can't fix it by fixing a few links. It has to be top down. And as I said, if you have just a few resources invested in the top and getting the top people at the top along the journey and equipping them in holding their folks accountable, and be patient, and with time it'll happen. There's no easy answer to this. Persistence and time.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we don't try, then it's definitely not going to happen. So a lot of persistence, time, and of course, at JobServe, we've also seen a lot of training and sensitization that's happening, across the board of different people as recruiters, as hiring managers, even as colleagues and bosses of women. Great. I'd love to keep going with the questions that we're getting from the audience, and whichever speaker would like to take it, please do raise your hand. So another question is from Suchi. She says, thank you for the insights and great discussion. Being from strategic HR programs, experience and transitioning between countries, how industries are supporting restarting opportunities for country transitioning candidates for operations role, as well as we don't want diversity to drop over there. Request panels view and resources sharing on it. So basically, I think the question is more around when women are transitioning between countries, and I think more from a non-tech point of view. That how do we ensure diversity requirements are met even when it comes to transitioning women transitioning between countries. Mitali, please go.
Yeah, Neha, I think that's a great question. And I may not be able to answer the question specifically for non-tech, but I can speak what I've seen. I have personally made transitions to within my company between geographies, and have seen policies that support these transitions in terms of creating the infrastructure, creating the environment where you get integrated into the localized culture, as well as support in building your network. I believe some of these things is applicable no matter which domain you are from, whether you are in a technical domain or whether you are in operations. If companies can look at providing with resources of how you start with, the first 6 to 8 months is very critical when you make transitions from one culture to another culture. It happens even within India when you move from one city to another city. So when you're making a transition across countries, it becomes even more important. Understanding the policies, understanding the local laws, regulations, creating your initial list of contacts and support groups so that you can, your go-to list. I think those are some of the things that can help ease someone who is transitioning to a different country, so that you are not left hanging. Companies have policies that can cover for what your job requires, but it is more of the social conditioning and the support circle that I think is important for someone who made the transition to actually stick after making the move. It's especially hard in this post-pandemic, where everybody is still virtual. So even if you move from one country to another, it really takes months for you to actually assimilate, because you are not meeting face to face, right? The people in your in the new region, and it just makes it harder for you to create those personal connects and the connections, which makes it easy for many of us to create that extended work family that we talk about. I mean, we spend more than half of our waking up time in the work field. If we are off for 18 hours, we're spending, roughly about 10, 12 hours working with the colleagues. So those are some of the things that actually can help in easing the transition.
But I'd love so much, Mitali. Yeah, I hope, Sachi, that answered your question. We have another question from Shiva, and she says that she has seen different business sectors have greater ratios of women in leadership versus others which don't. Why do you think that is so? Is there anyone specific who would like to answer this? Tina, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can take it. I think it all boils down to, just basically the overall culture, the value and vision of the organization. And then, what is the lens you're looking at in diversity? Is it just about targets and goals and numbers? Is it about brand, or is it about holistically integrating the EI into your business and into your organization? And I think that's one critical part. So advancement and opportunity, and looking at, providing, underrepresented groups. It can be women, it can be intersectional as well, right? Women who come from underrepresented groups as well, to be part of your leadership team. And that can happen through succession planning. It can happen through leadership development programs. In Thoughtworks, we have the Women in Leadership Development Program. So there is a larger global leadership development program. And as part of that, we have the Women and Underrepresented Group Leadership Development Program called WILD. And we also have a toolkit where you can pick up the global program and you can customize, at the regional level as well. So I think having a focused lens around what is the diversity in my leadership? How am I growing my, my employees internally? Where do I see potential? How do I support them? Is something that needs to be integrated into the overall ethos value of the organization. And it cannot happen overnight. That's one. Two is when you are replacing someone for a leadership role, a lot of times organizations either look for leaders internally or they go and hire externally. When you hire externally, sometimes in Thoughtworks, we just say, hey, there's no gender diversity in the leadership team when it comes to this particular role, or when it comes to, for example, in sales or demand related roles. And so for this, even if it takes longer, we are going to find, candidates from WGM. And it's more effort. It's a lot more intentional, but it's also about how you onboard them into the organization and how you provide support. And it's not about benevolent sexism, because a lot of time when we use support, it gets misinterpreted as, oh, we are the men of the organization and we will support you. We will take care of you. It's not about that. This is about understanding that we don't all start at the same place, and there, and we need to provide the necessary support beyond just looking at it as benevolent sexism.
Great, lovely. Thank you, Tina. Ruhi, would you like to take the question also?
Yeah, so just taking a cue from what Tina said, I think the question was slightly different, that you see more women in a specific kind of an industry, right? And not in others. I think it's the bias that we live with, right? Today, if you look around, you'll see more women as teachers and more nurses as women, right? So I think it's just about breaking the bias. This is what the UN campaign is all about for this year in the International Women's Day, right? To break the bias. I think traditionally some businesses or some jobs has been seen, to be aligned to more women. And therefore, this is what we see. And, this is what we talk about in our AI as well, that the data sets, always treat a particular gender and say a bias. So nurse will always be a female, a teacher would always be a female. But I think this is rapidly changing. For example, you never saw a lot of women on a manufacturing floor, right? On a shop floor. You would see them more in offices. But that is changing as more women get educated, more women coming out of engineering colleges. And this is the whole intent of conversations like this, where we bring in saying there's an intentionality of careers from business owners to be able to change it. I started on the shop floor, right? I started in the largest steel plant in the country. And, this was like 3 decades ago. So, it was not about breaking the bias. It was just about having the opportunity to do it. And I'm grateful for that, because it taught me so many aspects of leadership, which I practice today. So I think women are breaking those biases brilliantly. You see women becoming fighter pilots in our country, women joining the naval ships. So I think this is the culture that we as parents, as leaders, as organizations have to continue to break, right? And ensure that, nothing is impossible is what I believe for women, because there's a true tagline which we live with is, when she rises, we all rise, right? So continue to work with it and say, and I think the UN tagline this year is very, very apt, and, taking a cue from what Tina mentioned, is just about break the bias. There's nothing which women can't do. So more power to whoever asked that question brilliantly today, because it just sums up of what we are trying to do on this panel today. Thank you for that, Neha.
Absolutely, Ruhi. And yes, biases do exist. We need to acknowledge them, be aware of them, and then go ahead and break them. So with that, I'm actually very cognizant of the time and would like to close the session on that note, and especially on that note that when she rises, we will all rise. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today for this very insightful discussion. And I hope the audience took back some great insights, and we will definitely be sharing these discussions in the future as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.